Welcome to Tangled and Splattered, where our pumpkin spiced inspiration comes to life through our art. The materials and paint palette colors are in the place where you find those things. Obviously, we're using a lot of orange because it's pumpkin painting, but I also decided I wanted a nice background. I've seen other artists do this in their videos where they create a base or background color, and I thought I would give it a try. So I start by wetting the entire canvas to make it easy to spread the color around, and I decided to make the background color ochre. I feel like it gives the perfect muted fall vibes. Color pops and orange will be added later, don't worry. I was struck by inspiration one night before bed and I sketched it out the next day. I had this thought of painting a pumpkin with all the little vines spelling out pumpkin spice in the most curly Q viney type of way. So I sketched it and adjusted it until I was happy. I then used acrylic markers to set the pumpkin and vine lines and waited until I had time to actualize my pumpkin spice dreams. If you have watched any of my videos so far, you'll know that I love fall. I love pumpkin spiced everything, and I love art and making things. So, what better way to celebrate the month of Halloween and the best season of the year than by painting something a little pumpkin spicy? After painting the background and letting it dry while we worked on some other paintings, we want our pumpkin to really pop. So while we are using our orange, we also want to use some of the browns and the yellow to add the highlights and shadows to the pumpkin. I'm not perfectly blending all of the colors, and I feel like whenever you're painting with acrylic, if you don't like how it looks, you can always add more color or a different color when it's dry. So I'm always happy to add more color. I was noticing that the colors from the acrylic markers were still visible underneath this first layer of orange, and the paint wasn't quite opaque enough or saturated enough. So I did eventually decide that I wanted to add more layers to the pumpkin to really make sure that the lines behind it weren't visible. I eventually added more orange, yellow, and brown to really get those colors saturated the way I wanted them to be. While I was painting the pumpkin, I was thinking more and more about the background. I wasn't sure, other than the ochre, what exactly I wanted with the background, but I knew I wanted something special. Eventually, I decided to do some sort of rainbow gradient. I started with orange on the bottom because I didn't want the orange to touch the outline of the pumpkin and blend too much into it. And another thing I decided to do was blend ochre with each of the rainbow colors. It honestly gave such a fall vibe to each of the colors, and it really tied it together with the rest of the ochre background. That's another thing I learned from multiple other artists' videos on YouTube. And I wanted to give it a try with this painting, and I'm really happy I did. You can really seem to tie a painting together with blending one color into all of the other colors that you use. So honestly, so happy with how this turned out on this painting. So while we're going through each of the rainbow colors, I did decide to blend it with the color that came before it. So, or the color that's right next to it. So you will see me doing some blending for each of these colors. And I love how, because we started with orange at the bottom, we end up with red and purple at the top together. We normally don't get to see that in rainbows because the red and purple are on the opposite sides of the rainbow. But when we're painting, we can do what we want. We can do it in any order we want. So the rainbow, painting this on the bottom like this, ended up kind of becoming like a little table or surface that the pumpkin was sitting on. It's not clear what type of surface it is. It's just kind of a rainbow surface. And I really ended up loving this. The ochre stays at the top part of the painting as like the background. And then from after I was done with the rainbow, I just end up having to focus on the vine and the stem part of the pumpkin. So here we are finishing that rainbow gradient with red at the top. We want to make sure things are blending, and you can see that we're just kind of turning the canvas to make it like whatever side we're working on to make it easiest for us to work on because we do have wet paint kind of throughout the canvas right now. So we just keep turning our work back and forth. And then we want that line, the top line for red to be a little bit more straight. So we kind of get that up to the pumpkin a little bit more straight. And here we are going to start painting the stem. So to paint the stem, I wanted to blend the green and the ochre to tie back to the color scheme. And I also wanted to add some of the unblended browns to the paintbrush so that the stem would have a bit more texture like it would in real life. And I also used the curves of the pumpkin ridges to try to push those stems down into it to make it look a bit more like it's a real life pumpkin. That's like a pumpkin, maybe that's even still growing. And I keep doing that with the stem until I'm happy that it looks like it would be a really good candidate for the grape pumpkin. Here we keep finishing up our stem. And then we mix a little bit more paint in order for us to be able to get through the kind of curlicue vine stage here. So now we go through and we add the green that we mixed to make those curlicue vines. This is where I selected to use my detailed brushes. I think they were technically from a brush set for painting models, like model cars, but I find that they work really well for me when I'm trying to paint these fine details. And you can see here, it's just the right size for these letters. You'll see that I did choose to paint the pumpkin spice part of this upside down since the paint on the bottom of the canvas was still wet and I was trying to not have to work around that. So I painted it upside down and I just followed the outlines of the acrylic marker that I could still see through that light ochre layer. Looping around and swirling through each letter, I I can't remember if it was a movie or a show I saw once where someone described how they had a teacher tell them to draw something upside down because then their mind isn't trying to make it how it thinks it should be, but instead it's following the lines and shapes of the actual picture, and it causes you to kind of analyze it more. I felt like that actually may have been a positive effect for me when I was working with these viney, twirly, pumpkin spicy letters. So if you know the name of the movie or show I'm talking about, comment it below because now it's kind of bothering me that I can't remember. One challenge that I will say I have with the smaller detail brush is keeping enough paint on the brush. Because the brush is small, it is great for details, but it only holds so much paint. So the brush just really doesn't hold very much paint. And because of that, I have to dip my brush in the paint at least a couple times for every letter. I was really glad I had the outline to follow at this point since I did have to kind of keep going back and forth with the paint. And I definitely also was not worried about the opaqueness of the green on top of the acrylic marker letters for this portion, like I was with the pumpkin. I was fine with it coming through if it came through. I just wanted to be able to get the vines to look how I had imagined them. So I keep working my way through these vines. And as I work my way to the other vines on the other side of the painting, I will move my painting again because I, again, don't want to work across the wet paint. So I just keep adding the color to my brush and twirling it around each of the letters, each of the loops, and twirling it around each of these vines. I really enjoyed this part of the process. I enjoyed the looping, the twirling, the spinning, the whole piece of it. I just really found this part of this painting to be really enjoyable. And I actually found it to be so enjoyable that I realized when I was done with these vines and with the lettering that I really wasn't mentally done making the twirly and curly cues on this painting. So I ended up deciding that I was going to do some more twirly curly cue things in the ochre part of the background. And I really just had so much fun doing this. This part of it was a little different because I didn't have lines to follow. I was completely free of expectations. So I just twirled and looped the paint around and around over and over again, between the letters, on top of the letters, around the vines and stem. I had so much fun with this, and I really love how it turned out. It feels like it was meant to be on this pumpkin spice themed painting. Like it was hiding inside of there all along, and I just was able to let it out. I loved this part of the process so much that I ended up deciding to go back in with the iridescent paint and go over the viney pumpkin spice lettering with an iridescent green. And also, I decided to create a similar pattern with the iridescent orange on the pumpkin. I really love iridescent paints and shiny, sparkly paints in my paintings. It makes me so happy, and I smile every time I look at one of my paintings with beautiful sparkle on it. In this painting, the iridescent is like a fun surprise that you get only when you see it from a certain angle and certain lighting. Honestly, this ends up being one of the favorite paintings that I've made in a long time. I love it. Not just because I love pumpkin spice, everything, but really because of how it came together. How this looks in regular lighting, how it looks when the iridescent pops, every single angle of it. I love it, and I enjoyed painting it so much. What is your favorite painting or project you've worked on recently? What do you want to see me make next? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video and felt some inspiration to make something yourself. If you'd like to see other fall inspired creations I come up with before winter season is here, give me a follow. Happy pumpkin spice season!